The courtroom was silent. The hum of the air conditioning seemed too loud, almost deafening. Elon Musk, billionaire, inventor, and CEO, sat in the defendant's chair, his face calm and composed. But beneath that calm facade, something was shifting inside him. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone could feel it. The judge, a stern woman in her late 50s, with glasses perched on her nose and a no-nonsense attitude, stared down at Elon. Her gavel sat before her like the sword of Damocles, waiting to fall. She cleared her throat, and the room stilled. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, her voice cutting through the silence, "this case has gone on long enough. It's time for you to answer the real question here. Are you willing to take responsibility for your actions, or do you intend to continue hiding behind your wealth and influence?" Elon's eyes flickered for a moment. His hand, which had been casually resting on the arm of his chair, tightened into a fist. He wasn't expecting this. The judge's words struck a nerve, deep. He had always been able to navigate difficult situations, whether it was launching rockets into space or running one of the most valuable companies in the world. But here, in this cold, sterile courtroom, he felt the weight of the legal system pressing down on him in a way nothing had before. This was not a simple lawsuit. This was personal. The room was filled with reporters, each one poised to capture every word, every shift in his expression. The media had been watching him like hawks for months, waiting for any crack in his armor. And now, it seemed that the cracks were starting to show. "Mr. Musk," the judge repeated, her gaze unflinching, "you have built an empire on innovation and progress, but what happens when that innovation goes too far? What happens when it crosses the line? Today, you must answer for that." Elon swallowed hard, a rare moment of uncertainty overtaking him. He had been in the public eye for so long, dealing with controversies ranging from his tweets to his business dealings, but this? This was different. This was no longer about just business, it was about his legacy, his integrity, his very identity. "Your Honor," Elon finally spoke, his voice steady but with a hint of something unspoken. "I am not hiding. I never have. Everything I've done, every decision I've made, was for progress. For humanity. And if that means making tough calls, then so be it. But I stand by my actions. Always." The judge's eyes narrowed. "We shall see about that." As the judge called for a brief recess, Elon remained seated, the weight of her words still hanging in the air. His legal team, a group of sharp, polished professionals, gathered around him immediately. But their faces weren't the comforting, confident masks they usually wore. No, they too were worried, tension emanated from their posture. They had prepared for this moment, sure, but they hadn't expected it to come like this. The judge had thrown down the gauntlet, and now Elon had to decide how to play his hand. "Are you okay?" one of his top lawyers asked, her voice low. Elon didn't answer right away. His eyes were focused on the judge's seat, now empty. He was lost in thought. "I don't know," he finally said. This is different. This isn't just about the company or the product anymore. It's about me. My integrity. I'm being questioned in a way I never thought I would be." His lawyer nodded but didn't press further. She could see the strain in his face, the vulnerability that Elon rarely showed to anyone. In the past, he had faced challenges head-on, often with an air of defiance. But today? Today was different. As the recess ended, Elon rose from his seat. The room fell silent as he stepped back into the spotlight, his every move scrutinized. He could feel the weight of the judge's gaze on him, but more than that, he could feel the eyes of the world upon him. This wasn't just a trial. This was the moment that could define the rest of his life. He turned to face the judge, the courtroom now filled with an air of anticipation. His legal team gathered around him, their expressions steely, but inside, each of them was wondering the same thing: could they win this? Could they protect the man who had changed the world in so many ways? but now found himself cornered in a way that even his genius couldn't help him escape. The judge cleared her throat again. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice ringing out, "before we proceed, let me make one thing clear, I am not here to cater to your reputation or your public image. I am here to find the truth." A wave of unease rippled through the room. Elon's heart beat a little faster in his chest. This wasn't going to be easy. Elon Musk didn't become the man he was by following the rules. Raised in South Africa, he was a child of technology, a dreamer, someone who could always see beyond the present. He was obsessed with the idea of changing the world. From coding his own video games as a young boy to creating one of the most valuable companies in the world, Tesla, Elon's journey had been marked by relentless ambition and a desire to challenge the status quo. He had always been known for his big ideas, his bold moves, and his willingness to take risks. He launched rockets into space, designed electric cars that people loved, and hated, and even tried to revolutionize transportation with the Hyperloop. He didn't just want to be successful, he wanted to change the future. But that drive had come with consequences. His relationships with family, friends, and even his employees had often been strained. The pressure of running a multi-billion-dollar company had taken its toll on his personal life. His divorce, his struggles with mental health, and his sometimes erratic behavior on social media had all painted a picture of a man who was just as controversial as he was brilliant. Now, in this courtroom, Elon faced a new kind of challenge. He wasn't just fighting to defend his business. He was fighting to defend himself. His personal integrity was on the line. And if he lost here, it could all come crashing down, his empire, his reputation, his legacy. The courtroom resumed, and the proceedings took on a different tone. The prosecutor was relentless, throwing accusation after accusation at Elon. Each one seemed to dig deeper into his personal and professional life. The questions weren't just about the business anymore, they were about his character, his morals, and his decision-making. With each passing hour, the pressure mounted. Elon found himself drawn into a vortex of doubt and uncertainty. He had faced tough situations before, but this was different. The stakes had never been so high. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor said, leaning in. "Are you willing to take responsibility for the damage you've caused? Or will you continue to deflect blame?" Elon felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't used to being on the defensive. He had always been the one who led, who pushed forward, never afraid to take risks. But now, he was cornered. And the world was watching. The future was uncertain, and for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk wasn't sure how this one would end. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the recess came to an end. Elon's mind raced as he took his seat once again. His usual confidence, the sharp mind that propelled him to the top of the tech world, felt distant. Instead, he felt exposed. The weight of the public scrutiny, the relentless media coverage, and the judge's sharp words all pressed down on him, and no amount of money or success could shield him from it now. As the judge called the session to order, Elon noticed the uneasy looks exchanged between his legal team. His lead attorney, a seasoned litigator named Richard, had always exuded an air of calm control, but today even he was pacing, his brows furrowed in thought. "Richard," Elon said quietly, leaning in. "What are we missing here?" Richard paused for a moment before responding, his voice low. "I've never seen the judge this combative. We knew this case was going to be difficult, but the personal attacks. They're different. It's not just about the law anymore, Elon. It's about you." Elon exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. The last thing he wanted was for this case to turn into a personal witch hunt. He had dealt with enough public scrutiny over the years, from his erratic Twitter rants to his constant clashes with the media. But this was different. This time, the accusations weren't just coming from journalists or angry customers, they were coming from the very people who had the power to make or break his future. "I've built everything on trust," Elon muttered, his voice strained. "My companies, my reputation. Everything I've done with the belief that we can make a real difference. But it feels like now, everyone wants to tear that down." Richard gave him a sharp look, his gaze unwavering. "The judge isn't questioning your vision, Elon. She's questioning your actions. Your accountability. And that's what's at stake here." The words hit harder than Elon expected. Accountability. It had always been a blurry line for him. Sure, he'd always taken responsibility for the major successes of his companies, Tesla's electric cars, SpaceX's rockets, and his efforts to make humanity a multiplanetary species. But the darker side of his rise to the top, the battles with regulators, the breakdowns with partners, the aggressive business moves that sometimes bordered on ruthless, he had never been forced to fully own those moments. The trial had only just begun, but already, it was clear this wasn't going to be the kind of case that could be settled with a simple settlement. This was going to be a battle for his character. For his soul. As the session continued, Elon's thoughts drifted back to his past. His mind played over the years of his journey, the key moments that had led him here, his determination to change the world, his drive to push technology forward, and the sacrifices he made along the way. He had always been the one willing to go to extreme lengths for what he believed in. But what if those lengths had come with too many costs? Elon's rise from a young boy fascinated by computers and science to a tech titan was legendary. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, he had always been a quiet, introspective child. He was the kind of kid who would spend hours reading books, teaching himself how to code, and imagining a future where technology could solve humanity's greatest problems. His father, Elon Musk, was a tough, demanding man who never truly believed in Elon's dreams, often ridiculing him for his lofty goals. But Elon never stopped. He always knew he was destined for something greater. His mother, May Musk, a model and dietitian, was the one who supported him, nurturing his dreams and encouraging his passion for technology. It was from her that he inherited his resilience and his unwavering belief in his own potential. Still, no amount of love or encouragement could shield him from the reality of the road ahead. When Elon moved to Canada, then to the United States to attend the University of Pennsylvania, he had a vision, to create a company that would change the world. He dropped out of Stanford after just 2 days to start Zip2, a software company that helped newspapers create an online presence. That venture ultimately led to his first major success and a $307 million windfall when it was sold to Compaq. From there, it was a whirlwind, X.com, which eventually became PayPal and was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Then came Tesla, SpaceX, and SolarCity, each one a bold leap toward transforming industries and revolutionizing the way people lived, worked, and thought about the future. Elon's passion for progress, however, was always at odds with his approach. He was the type of leader who pushed his employees to their limits, demanded results at any cost, and never backed down from a challenge. It was a mentality that worked for him in the cutthroat world of Silicon Valley, where taking risks and pushing boundaries was the only way to succeed. But as Elon sat in that courtroom, the weight of his past decisions became undeniable. He had always taken risks, always believed in the bigger picture, but what if those risks had alienated the very people who helped him get there? What if those sacrifices, those difficult choices, were the very things that were now coming back to haunt him? The prosecution continued its relentless questioning, probing into every detail of Elon's companies and personal life. The questions weren't just legal, they were personal. Every misstep, every controversial tweet, every disagreement with regulators was being used to paint a portrait of a man who was willing to go to any lengths to get what he wanted. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor asked, his voice cold and calculating. "You've built a reputation as someone who can't be touched, someone who bends the rules to fit your vision. But what happens when that vision is called into question? When your actions hurt people? What then? Elon clenched his jaw, the word striking a chord deep inside him. He had been through so much, every setback, every obstacle, every failure, and still, he had kept pushing. It was hard to hear these accusations, especially from someone who clearly didn't understand the full scope of his mission. "I'm not perfect," Elon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I've always tried to do what's right. I've always believed that what we're doing here, the work we're doing, is going to change the world. And sometimes, change doesn't come easily. Sometimes, it requires breaking things down to build them back up." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Elon's legal team exchanged quick glances. Was this the breakthrough they needed? Or had he just made the situation worse? As the day wore on, Elon's confidence began to slip. His usual deflection tactics weren't working. The courtroom, with its cold, indifferent walls, seemed to close in around him. Every glance from the gallery, every whisper from the media, felt like an indictment of everything he had built. But then, as if a light at the end of a dark tunnel, Elon's eyes fell on something: his children. Just a brief glance toward the back of the courtroom where they sat, their innocent faces staring back at him, gave him the strength to carry on. They were his reason. Everything he did was for them, for the future. And that future wasn't just about rockets and electric cars. It was about being better. Being accountable. With a newfound resolve, Elon stood up and faced the judge, ready to fight back. This was his moment. He would not be defined by his mistakes, but by how he would rise from them. The tension in the courtroom had reached its breaking point. The prosecution's relentless questioning had been wearing on Elon. The media had shifted from curiosity to judgment, casting shadows over his every word. But something had changed in him after that fleeting moment of clarity, the look at his children, his reason for all of this. He wasn't just fighting for his companies or his fortune anymore. This was bigger than that. He was fighting for his future, his integrity, and his vision for a better world. The judge banged her gavel, calling the room to order once again. Elon's legal team seemed tense, but there was a palpable shift in their energy, a subtle sense of hope. They were finally seeing the side of Elon they knew could get them through this, the visionary, the unshakable force who had risen against all odds, who had fought against the skeptics, the critics, and the naysayers his entire life. But this time, the stakes were different. This time, the battle wasn't about the next big innovation, it was about proving he could be trusted, even when things were at their darkest. The prosecutor, a sharp-dressed man in his late 40s, with an air of superiority, approached the podium once more. His voice was steady, rehearsed, and aimed directly at Elon. "Mr. Musk," he began, his tone cutting through the air like a knife, "you've made billions. You've built empires. But let's talk about the human cost of all of this. You've boasted about your work, your progress, but when things didn't go according to plan, when your actions caused harm, you simply pushed forward without consequence. This trial is about accountability. The question we're asking today is, will you finally admit that your actions, your decisions, have caused real damage to real people?" The words hung in the air like smoke, and for a moment, the courtroom held its collective breath. Elon could feel the weight of the prosecutor's words pressing on his chest. The scrutiny was unlike anything he had experienced before. His mind raced, but he forced himself to focus. He couldn't let this break him. Not now. For a moment, he closed his eyes. Elon's thoughts drifted back to the early days, before Tesla, before SpaceX, when he was just a young man with an idea. His first big venture, Zip2, had been a startup with a dream, taking city guides online for newspapers. The odds had been against him from the start. The tech world was dominated by giants, and he was just a kid trying to break in. But he was relentless. His father had never believed in him, his peers had laughed at him, but Elon didn't care. He had a vision, and he wasn't about to let anything stop him. When Zip2 sold for nearly $300 million, Elon had used that money to launch X.com, a revolutionary idea that would become PayPal. The company, with its groundbreaking online payment systems, would change how people used money forever. But again, success didn't come without a price. The pressure was unrelenting. He was fired from his own company, a humbling moment that many would have crumbled under. But not Elon Musk. He picked himself up, dusted himself off, and kept pushing forward. The creation of SpaceX, Tesla, and SolarCity followed the same path. Ambition, risk, and relentless determination. But with every great leap, there were failures. And with those failures came immense criticism. When SpaceX's early launches exploded, the media had written him off. They called him crazy, reckless, a failure. But he refused to give up. It wasn't just business, it was personal. Elon believed in the potential of the human race to go beyond the stars, to move toward sustainable energy, to create a future free of fossil fuels. That vision had guided him through years of late nights, missed opportunities, and back-to-back failures. It was the belief that something greater was on the horizon, that the world could be changed if only he could push the boundaries far enough. But now, in the face of this trial, Elon had to confront the consequences of his actions, the decisions he had made that had propelled him forward but had, at times, hurt those around him. He had always been the visionary, the man with the next big idea, but what if, in his pursuit of progress, he had lost sight of the people who mattered most? The prosecutor's voice interrupted his thoughts, pulling him back into the present moment. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "you built your empire on innovation, yes. But when things don't go right, when the consequences of your decisions impact people's lives, you think you can just walk away without answering for it? The evidence is clear, your actions have harmed countless individuals. And we're not talking about your employees or shareholders, we're talking about ordinary people, people who trusted you and your promises." Elon's jaw tightened. It was true. He had been so focused on the big picture, on the mission to change the world, that he had overlooked the smaller details. The people who had believed in him, the customers, the investors who had put their faith in his companies. They were collateral damage in his quest for greatness. But the thing was, he hadn't set out to harm anyone. He had always been driven by a desire to do good, to make life better for everyone. He wasn't just building electric cars or rockets, he was trying to pave the way for a future where humanity could thrive. But the road to that future was bumpy. And now, the mistakes were coming back to haunt him. His legal team whispered among themselves, trying to find a way to counter the prosecutor's argument, but Elon was lost in thought. This wasn't just a courtroom battle, it was an existential one. Could he continue pushing forward, knowing the cost of progress? Could he truly be the man who changed the world without hurting the very people he hoped to help? Just as Elon was beginning to feel the weight of the world bearing down on him, a new twist emerged. The door to the courtroom opened, and a new figure entered, an unexpected witness. It was an ex-employee of Tesla, someone who had worked closely with Elon in the early days of the company. The room fell silent as the man took the stand. His name was Jack Davidson, a former senior engineer who had left Tesla years ago under less than ideal circumstances. Elon's stomach churned as he recognized him, but he didn't show it. This was the last person he expected to see today. Jack Davidson had been one of the earliest supporters of Elon's vision, but over time, things had soured. There were whispers of disagreements, of a clash between Elon's aggressive leadership style and the reality of the company's struggles. Jack had walked away from Tesla, disillusioned, and now he was here, ready to testify against him. The prosecutor smiled. "Mr. Davidson," he began, "can you tell the court what you witnessed during your time at Tesla? Were there instances where you saw Mr. Musk take actions that jeopardized the safety or well-being of employees or customers?" Jack's eyes met Elon's for the first time in years. "Yes," he said, his voice flat. "There were times when decisions were made for the sake of progress, without considering the consequences. It was all about getting to the next milestone, and if that meant cutting corners, well, that's what happened. The words hit Elon like a punch to the gut. He had always believed that the risks he took were for the greater good. But hearing them from someone who had been in the trenches, someone who had witnessed the costs firsthand, made him question everything. For the first time in years, Elon felt a wave of doubt. Had he truly done everything for the right reasons? Had his drive for progress clouded his judgment? As the day came to a close, the courtroom was left in a stunned silence. The pressure was mounting, the conflict was reaching its peak, and Elon was faced with a crossroads. Would he continue to fight for his vision at all costs, or would he finally confront the reality of his actions and take responsibility for the harm he had caused? The battle was far from over. But one thing was clear, this trial had changed everything. The courtroom was still reeling from the bombshell testimony. Jack Davidson's words echoed in Elon's mind, a stark reminder of the sacrifices and consequences that came with his ambition. The image of his children, who had been his inspiration from the beginning, flitted in and out of his thoughts, but he couldn't shake the guilt that now hung over him like a heavy cloud. As the gavel banged to signal the end of the day's session, Elon's legal team scrambled to regroup. His lead attorney, Richard, was already on his feet, directing the other lawyers in hushed voices. Elon remained in his chair, motionless, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. "Elon," Richard said softly, walking over and lowering his voice. "We need to stay focused. We're not out of this yet." Elon looked up at him, the weight of the day's events visible in his eyes. "I'm not sure we can win this, Richard. The prosecutor has the public on their side, and now Jack, he's only making it worse." Richard shook his head, a slight frown crossing his face. "You're not seeing the full picture. Yes, Jack's testimony is damaging, but it's only one part of a much bigger narrative. You've built an empire, no one can deny that. And while there have been missteps along the way, there's also been incredible innovation. We can turn this around. But we need you to take a different approach. You have to show the court who you really are, who you've always been." Elon sighed, rubbing his temples. He had always prided himself on being unapologetically himself, but this felt different. This wasn't about shaking up the tech world with electric cars or space missions. This was about defending his character, his legacy, and perhaps even his very freedom. The stakes had never been so high. "You know, when I started Tesla," Elon said, almost to himself, "I never thought I'd have to explain myself like this. I thought I was just doing what I believed was right for the world." Richard nodded. "And you still do. But now, you have to show everyone that what you've done, and what you continue to do, isn't just about the technology, it's about the people. The ones who've trusted you." Elon sat back in his chair and allowed his mind to drift once again. This time, however, he wasn't just recalling his past as a businessman. He thought about his family. His mother, May, who had always believed in him, and his father, Errol, who had never understood his vision but had instilled in him a sense of self-reliance. His siblings, Kimball and Tosca, had been there from the beginning, offering support even when the world seemed to question his every move. But his thoughts also turned to his children. X, Y, and the twins, Griffin and Xavier. His role as a father had changed over the years, and with that change, so had his understanding of the world. It wasn't enough to just build a great company or create life-changing technology. He had to create a world where his children, and the generations after them, could thrive. He had to be better, not just for them, but for everyone. Elon thought back to the early days of Tesla. The relentless drive to prove that electric vehicles could be more than just a novelty. It was about creating something that would outlast him. Something that would reduce humanity's dependence on fossil fuels and help mitigate the effects of climate change. He remembered the skeptics, the ones who said electric cars were a joke, that they could never compete with gas-powered vehicles. He had proved them wrong. But now, he faced a different challenge, one that was far more personal. The following morning, the trial resumed. The courtroom was packed, and the media cameras flashed as Elon entered. The sense of anticipation was palpable. The air was thick with tension as the judge called the session to order. This was it, the moment that would determine whether Elon Musk could redeem himself or whether the weight of his past actions would be too much to overcome. The prosecution wasted no time, calling more witnesses to the stand. Each one seemed to paint a picture of a man who was driven to the point of recklessness, willing to sacrifice anything, or anyone, in his pursuit of progress. But Elon remained calm, his face unreadable. And then, it was his turn. As Elon stood to take the stand, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. This wasn't just about defending his company, it was about owning up to the parts of his journey that had been messy, the parts he wished he could undo. It was time to face the truth. He walked to the witness stand with a quiet confidence. His voice was steady as he addressed the court. "I've made mistakes. I've pushed boundaries. I've done things I'm not proud of. But everything I've done, every decision I've made, was with one goal in mind, to make the world a better place. To leave behind a legacy that could change the future for the better. I'm not perfect. But I'm not the villain that some people have made me out to be." There was a pause as he let the weight of his words settle in the room. "I've made mistakes. I've pushed people too hard. I've made decisions that have hurt people. And for that, I am truly sorry. But I've learned from those mistakes. I've grown. And I'm still committed to the same goal, to help humanity thrive, to help us reach a future where technology can be a force for good." Elon's words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was silence in the courtroom. The judge, normally stern and unmoving, seemed to soften for the briefest of moments. The jury, who had watched him with skepticism up until now, seemed to reconsider the man they had been told to judge. There was a shift in the air after Elon's testimony. The prosecutors, who had been so sure of their case, seemed to falter for the first time. The defense team felt the shift too, their confidence growing as Elon's words began to sink in. But the tension was far from gone. The trial was far from over. There would still be questions to answer, decisions to make, and consequences to face. But for the first time in days, Elon felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth of his actions could be enough to change the outcome. As the day's session came to a close, Elon took a deep breath. The weight on his shoulders was still there, but for the first time in a long while, he could see the possibility of a future beyond this courtroom, beyond the trial. And as he walked out of the courthouse, his mind turned back to what mattered most, his children, his vision, and the future he still hoped to build. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but the first step toward redemption had been taken. As the trial entered its final stages, the true nature of Elon's character, and the lasting impact of his journey, was becoming clear. But would it be enough? Only time would tell. The days following Elon's testimony passed in a blur. The media coverage intensified, with every word and every move scrutinized by an ever-watchful public. Headlines ranged from praise to scorn, but one thing was certain, Elon Musk had captured the world's attention. His candid admission of mistakes, the remorse in his voice, had shifted the tide of the trial. But the real battle was far from over. The storm was far from calm. As he sat in the quiet of his office at SpaceX headquarters, the weight of the situation pressed on him once again. His legal team worked tirelessly behind closed doors, gathering evidence, preparing for their next moves. But Elon couldn't shake the feeling that everything was hanging by a thread. For a man who had made history time and time again, the idea of losing everything, of being judged not for his successes but for his failures, was a haunting thought. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as his mind raced. He had made enormous contributions to the world: electric cars, space exploration, renewable energy. But now, all of that seemed overshadowed by the trial. The guilt of those who had been hurt by his actions, whether through business decisions or the consequences of his relentless drive, weighed on him heavily. Was all of it worth it? His phone buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a message from his brother, Kimball. I know this has been a rough few days, but you're doing the right thing. Don't lose sight of who you are. The world needs you now more than ever. Elon smiled faintly, appreciating the message of support. Kimball had always been the steady presence in his life, the one person who could remind him of his purpose when everything else seemed to be falling apart. He typed back quickly. Thanks, Kimball. Trying to keep my head above water. He set his phone down, lost in thought again. The world was in turmoil, but the future was still his to shape. Wasn't that what he had always done? Pushed forward, no matter the odds. The next few days in the courtroom were a whirlwind of cross-examinations and testimonies. The prosecution didn't let up, relentlessly attacking Elon's credibility, pointing out every flaw, every mistake, and every moment of failure. They painted a picture of a man who had climbed to the top by trampling over the people who helped him get there. But Elon had one card left to play. It was the last day of the trial, and the pressure in the courtroom was palpable. The defense team had been preparing their closing arguments for weeks, but they knew that this final move would be crucial. Elon was scheduled to take the stand one last time. This time, however, his approach would be different. This time, it would be personal. Richard stood before the court, his voice unwavering as he made the final plea to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not just about business decisions or corporate strategy. It's about the man behind these companies, the man who has pushed the boundaries of innovation, who has sacrificed everything for a vision of a better world. Yes, Mr. Musk has made mistakes. But who among us hasn't? The difference is, he has faced those mistakes head-on, and he has worked tirelessly to fix them. He has made the world a better place through his companies, Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, and in doing so, he has inspired a generation of innovators to follow in his footsteps. Richard paused, allowing his words to settle. Elon Musk is not perfect. But he is not a villain. He is a man who has dedicated his life to making the impossible possible. A man who, despite every setback, continues to push forward because he believes in the future. And that is the man you must judge, not just the actions of the past. The defense rested, and Elon stood up to take the stand for the last time. As he made his way to the front, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. It was time to say what needed to be said. Elon took a deep breath as he sat in the witness chair. The courtroom seemed to shrink around him, all eyes focused on him. The intensity of the moment was undeniable. But this time, he wasn't just defending his companies or his actions. This time, he was defending his soul. He began slowly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I know I've made mistakes. I've pushed people too hard. I've made decisions that hurt others. And I'm sorry for that. I've always been driven by the belief that we can change the world, that we can make it a better place for our children, for future generations. But in that pursuit, I've hurt people. I've made sacrifices that I wish I could take back. And for that, I am truly sorry. There was a brief silence in the room. Elon could feel the eyes of the jury on him, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire world was watching. But he didn't falter. This was his truth, and he would stand by it. I'm not asking for your sympathy. I'm asking for your understanding. I am human. I have flaws, just like anyone else. But I've spent my life trying to make the world a better place. I've spent my life trying to give people hope, hope that we can build a sustainable future, that we can explore the stars, that we can create a world where we all thrive. His voice cracked slightly as he continued, but he held firm. I know I'm not perfect. I know I've hurt people. But I've learned from those mistakes. And I promise you this, I will do everything in my power to make things right. I will continue to fight for a better future, not just for my companies, but for everyone. The room was silent. Elon held the gaze of the jury, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in this trial, he felt that he wasn't just defending his actions, he was defending his very purpose. And for the first time in days, a sense of peace washed over him. He had done everything he could. As the final arguments were made, the judge called for a recess. The weight of the trial still hung heavy on Elon's shoulders, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this trial wasn't just about defending his mistakes, it was about showing that he had learned from them and was willing to change. That he wasn't the same man who had started this journey, and that the future could still be shaped by the lessons of the past. He walked out of the courtroom, his mind racing, but his heart a little lighter. The storm was far from over, but perhaps the calm was starting to come into view. The day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was more packed than it had ever been. Reporters were scattered throughout, their cameras clicking and flashing, capturing every moment. The tension in the room was suffocating, a tangible buzz in the air. Elon stood silently at the defense table, his hands clasped in front of him, his face unreadable. He had spoken his truth, laid himself bare, and now the fate of his future, and possibly his legacy, rested in the hands of the jury. Elon couldn't help but wonder if this would be the defining moment of his life. If this was the culmination of all his work, of all the sleepless nights spent pushing his companies to the brink of collapse, of all the risks he had taken in the name of progress. He had spent so many years working towards something bigger than himself, but now, the questions loomed larger than ever. Would it all be worth it? Would he be remembered as a visionary, or would the mistakes and the controversies overshadow everything? Richard, his lead attorney, sat beside him, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet tension. "It's in their hands now," he whispered, his voice low. Elon nodded, though he wasn't sure if he felt relief or dread. There was no turning back now. He had done all he could, spoken the truth, shown remorse, and explained the larger vision behind his ambition. If the jury could see past the failures and mistakes, perhaps they could understand the bigger picture. As the judge entered the courtroom, the chatter died down. The room grew eerily silent, every person on edge, awaiting the decision that could change everything. The judge took his seat and called the court to order. "Members of the jury," the judge began, his voice echoing in the room. "You have heard the evidence, the testimony, and the closing arguments. It is now time for you to deliberate and come to a decision." The words hung in the air, thick with anticipation. Elon swallowed hard as he watched the jury file out, their expressions serious, their minds undoubtedly filled with the weight of the task at hand. Elon's mind wandered as he sat in silence, trying to hold on to the feeling of hope that had emerged after his last testimony. His words had been raw, honest, and real. The remorse in his voice had been undeniable. But the truth was, the future was uncertain. He had placed everything on the line in that courtroom. And now, there was nothing left to do but wait. Minutes stretched into hours. The sense of time seemed to distort as he sat there, his eyes fixed on the door the jury would emerge from. Would they deliver the crushing blow that could end his career? Or would they offer him a second chance to redeem himself? Elon didn't answer any of them. His head was spinning, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had been found guilty of lesser charges, yes, but the guilt still lingered. The guilt of knowing that his actions had hurt people, his investors, his employees, the public who had trusted him. But there was something else there, too, a glimmer of hope. He wasn't entirely defeated. The verdict could have been much worse, and while it meant he had a battle ahead, it also meant that his dream, his vision, wasn't over yet. As he got into his car, Elon looked out the window at the world moving around him. People were living their lives, unaware of the storm he had just weathered. In that moment, a thought struck him: he was still here. His companies were still here. His vision, his drive to change the world, had not been snuffed out. The road ahead would be hard, no doubt. He would have to face the consequences of his actions, and there would be many who would continue to criticize him. But he was still Elon Musk, the man who had defied the odds time and time again. He turned to his team, who sat silently in the car with him. Richard was already making plans for the next steps, and the rest of the team was busy on their phones, managing the media storm. Elon felt the familiar pull of his company's calling to him, the weight of his purpose still heavy in his heart. "It's not over," Elon said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We'll rebuild, we'll push forward. I'm not done yet." As the car sped off toward the horizon, Elon realized something important. He wasn't just a man who had failed. He was a man who had learned, who had grown. And while the journey ahead might be fraught with challenges, he knew that his vision for the future hadn't been shattered. It had merely been delayed. The week after the verdict was a blur for Elon Musk. The media frenzy didn't die down, but now it had shifted. The headlines weren't just about the verdict, they were about the uncertainty of his future. Investors, board members, and employees all began to ask the same question: what's next for Elon Musk? Inside the offices of Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, the atmosphere was different. People were still working, still moving forward, but there was a palpable sense of tension. Some were unsure of their positions within the companies they had built, while others were quietly rooting for Elon to rise above the storm and lead them through it. Elon was aware of the whispers. He knew there was doubt creeping into the minds of those who had once placed all their trust in him. For a man who had built his empire on pushing boundaries and defying expectations, facing a world that was now questioning his credibility was something new. He sat in his office late one evening, looking out at the lights of Los Angeles twinkling below. His mind was racing, not just about the trial and its aftermath, but about the future. The future that, no matter how much he tried to prepare for it, seemed uncertain. Could he really recover from this? Could his vision still survive this legal blow? His phone buzzed. It was a text from Kimball. "Hey, I know this is tough, but remember who you are. You've always found a way. This is just another challenge to overcome." Elon stared at the text for a long moment before typing back. "I appreciate it, Kimball. But this time feels different. People are questioning everything now." "They're questioning you, not your vision," Kimball replied instantly. "And I think you know what you're going to do. You're going to show them why they're wrong. Just like you've always done." Elon put the phone down, reflecting on the words. Kimball was right. This wasn't just about his reputation, it was about proving to the world that his vision could not be so easily crushed. His ideas, his dream for the future, were bigger than any trial, any legal battle, or any headline. He had faced seemingly insurmountable odds before and had come out victorious. This time would be no different. But what would he have to sacrifice to make it through this storm? Elon stood at the front of a conference room the following morning, his legal team beside him and a group of senior executives gathered around. The mood was tense, but he wasn't about to let that dictate the direction of the conversation. This wasn't just a time for damage control, it was time to forge a new path forward. "All right," Elon began, his voice steady but firm, "we've been through a lot. But we're not done. Not by a long shot. What the jury decided was one step in a much bigger story. Yes, it's been a setback. But setbacks are what drive us forward. We've got two choices: we can let this define us, or we can redefine the story. I know what I'm choosing. How about you?" The room went quiet as everyone digested his words. This wasn't the Elon they had seen in the courtroom, a man weighed down by the verdict, but the Elon they knew from the boardrooms and launch sites, a leader who could rally people when everything seemed impossible. One of the senior executives, Rachel, a longtime ally, leaned forward. "What's the plan, Elon?" He smiled, the spark of his old confidence lighting up his eyes. "First things first, we don't hide. We face the challenge head-on. The world may see us as weak right now, but they're wrong. We're going to show them how strong we really are. We focus on our next mission, SpaceX's Mars timeline. We make sure Tesla's next-generation battery technology is so innovative, so groundbreaking, that no one will be able to ignore us. And we keep pushing forward with Neuralink, no matter the noise. Elon paused, watching the faces around him. They were listening. They were ready to follow him into the next phase. Get the teams ready. We have work to do, he added, standing taller, as if the weight of the past week had evaporated. He was moving forward, just as he always had. As the days passed, Elon and his teams worked tirelessly to get back on track. Tesla unveiled an ambitious new plan for its next-generation electric car, focusing on cutting-edge AI integration and self-driving capabilities that would set the company apart in the highly competitive market. Meanwhile, SpaceX continued its preparations for the next launch, a mission to bring a group of civilians into space, a major step toward Elon's dream of space travel for everyone. But it wasn't just about innovation anymore. Elon knew that he needed to do more than just launch rockets and build electric cars. He needed to reconnect with people, the employees who had supported him for years, the investors who had stood by him, and the public who had believed in his grand vision. A week later, Elon hosted a town hall at Tesla's headquarters, a move that was unconventional for a CEO of his stature. He wanted to show his employees that he was still in charge, still the visionary they had trusted. He needed to prove that the trial, the controversy, would not change the course of his companies. "Thank you all for being here," Elon said, standing in front of a packed auditorium. His voice was calm, but the passion in his words was undeniable. "I know these past few weeks have been hard. You've seen the media, you've heard the rumors. And I know some of you are worried about the future of this company. But let me be clear, we are not going anywhere. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, they are going to continue to grow, to innovate, and to change the world. Because that's what we do." There was a murmur of approval from the crowd. Elon paused, letting his words settle before continuing. "I've made mistakes. But I've also learned from them. And that's what makes us stronger. I'm committed to this mission, to making the future brighter for everyone. And I won't stop until we get there." The crowd erupted in applause. For a moment, Elon let himself feel the warmth of their support. It was a reminder of why he did this, the reason he had worked so hard, fought so many battles, and taken so many risks. It wasn't for the glory or the accolades. It was for the people who believed in him, and for the world he was trying to create. As the town hall came to an end, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced the darkest days of his career and emerged with a clearer vision of what lay ahead. The legal battles weren't over, but he was no longer afraid of what they might bring. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Elon felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. The road to redemption would be long, but Elon knew one thing for sure, he wasn't done yet. The courtroom was quiet, the tension thick in the air. Elon Musk sat at the defense table, his hands resting on his lap, his mind racing. It had been a week since the jury had returned their verdict, and while the initial shock had worn off, the uncertainty of what came next still loomed large. The world was watching, waiting to see if he would crumble under the pressure, or if he would rise from the ashes of the trial and reclaim his future. The judge's words still echoed in his mind, "We will convene again in 1 week to determine sentencing." 1 week. That was all the time Elon had to prepare for the next phase. The waiting was unbearable. He couldn't help but feel a familiar sense of dread creeping over him, the same kind of fear that had gripped him during his early years at Tesla when everything seemed on the verge of collapse. But this time was different. This time, the stakes were higher. His personal freedom, his companies, his legacy, all of it was on the line. Elon spent the following days in deep reflection, revisiting the lessons he had learned throughout his career. He thought back to the early days of Tesla, when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy and he had risked everything, his money, his reputation, his very future, to make his dream a reality. There had been many moments when failure seemed inevitable, yet here he was, having defied the odds. The trial was just another obstacle, another challenge to overcome. But this time, the challenge wasn't just about building a company or launching rockets. It was about rebuilding his personal reputation, earning back the trust of the public, his investors, and the people closest to him. He knew he couldn't do it alone, but the weight of responsibility was his to bear. He picked up the phone and dialed Kimball. "Hey, how's it going?" Kimball's voice came through, light and casual, as if the world hadn't just been turned upside down. "It's been a hell of a week," Elon replied. "I'm not sure how to navigate the next part of this. The sentencing. It's coming up, and I still don't know what to expect." "You've been through worse, you know," Kimball said. "You're still here, still fighting. That says something. Just focus on what you can control. And remember, we're all behind you." Elon let out a slow breath. "I know. But this is different. There's no clear path this time." There was a pause before Kimball spoke again, more seriously now. "Maybe there's no clear path because you're supposed to create one. You've always been good at that, Elon. This is just another part of the journey. It's up to you how it ends." Elon closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. He wasn't the kind of person who backed down from a challenge. If anything, he thrived on the obstacles. He had built Tesla and SpaceX on the belief that nothing was impossible. And he had to believe that same philosophy would guide him through this moment. "Thanks, Kimball," Elon said, his voice steadier now. "I appreciate it." As the days counted down to the sentencing hearing, the media storm continued. Every outlet had their take on the situation, and most of it was far from kind. Headlines screamed, "Elon Musk found guilty of fraud, what does this mean for Tesla and SpaceX?" and "The Rise and Fall of Elon Musk, a CEO's Tumultuous Journey." It felt like the whole world was waiting for him to fall from grace, for him to crack under the pressure. But Elon had learned to tune out the noise. He had been through public scrutiny before, when the Tesla Model 3 faced production delays, when SpaceX had rocket failures, and when his personal life had been dragged through the media. This time, however, the stakes were different. The question on everyone's mind wasn't whether he could lead his companies through adversity, it was whether he could survive the aftermath of his legal troubles. At Tesla's headquarters, employees went about their work as usual, but there was a noticeable undercurrent of tension. Some were still loyal, convinced that Elon could overcome anything. Others, however, had begun to question whether the public scandal would permanently damage the company's reputation. Elon's presence in the office was infrequent, as he focused on preparing for the next phase of his life. But he made a point to meet with key leaders within his companies, reassuring them that the path forward was still clear. Tesla was still on track to revolutionize the auto industry, SpaceX's plans to colonize Mars were still very much alive, and Neuralink would continue its mission to push the boundaries of what was possible in neurotechnology. Still, the weight of the legal battle loomed over everything. In private meetings with his legal team, Elon prepared for the worst but hoped for the best. He didn't know what the judge's final ruling would be, but he had made a vow to himself: no matter what happened, he would not let this setback define him. Elon knew that if he was going to survive this storm, he needed to get back to his core vision, the reason he started this journey in the first place. He had always believed that the future of humanity depended on innovation, and that belief was more important now than ever. Late one night, as he walked through the halls of SpaceX's headquarters, he found himself lost in thought. The company had made tremendous progress over the years, with successful launches and ambitious goals on the horizon. But the future still seemed so vast, so untapped. There was so much more to be done, and so many challenges yet to face. He paused in front of a wall of blueprints, looking at a mock-up of the Mars colony he had long dreamed of. It seemed so far away, yet so close. His dream wasn't just about electric cars or private space travel, it was about building a future where humanity could thrive beyond Earth, where the human race could become a multiplanetary species. And in that moment, with the weight of the trial hanging over him, Elon realized something important: this was bigger than him. It always had been. No matter what the outcome of the sentencing would be, he knew he couldn't let this trial define his legacy. His work was bigger than any court decision. He was driven by a vision that was rooted in something greater than himself. It was time to get back to work. As the sentencing day approached, Elon found himself in a state of quiet resolve. He wasn't afraid of what might happen next. He wasn't afraid of the consequences. He had faced impossible odds before, and he knew he would again. Whatever came, he would face it head-on. Because the future he had always dreamed of, one where humanity reached for the stars, was worth every sacrifice. The countdown to the sentencing hearing had begun. And no matter what, Elon Musk was ready for whatever came next. The morning of the sentencing hearing arrived far too soon for Elon Musk. The air was thick with anticipation, both inside the courtroom and beyond its walls. The media had descended in full force, cameras flashing, microphones poised, ready to capture every moment. It felt surreal. Elon had been at the center of media scrutiny before, but this was different. This was personal. Elon sat in the defense chair, his legal team surrounding him, each member working diligently on the final preparations. The sense of nervous energy was palpable in the room, but Elon remained unusually calm. It was as though he had already come to terms with whatever outcome might arise. It was almost as if this trial, this judgment, no longer held the same power over him. As the judge entered the courtroom, silence fell. The gavel struck, and the proceedings began. Elon looked up at the judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense reputation. She had presided over the case with a sense of impartiality, but Elon could feel the weight of her gaze. It wasn't a look of contempt, but of cold neutrality. He knew she had a responsibility, one that she would uphold to the letter of the law. The prosecutor presented their final arguments, painting Elon as a corporate villain, someone who had crossed ethical lines for personal gain. The media had amplified this image, and now the prosecutor reinforced it in the eyes of the public and the court. Elon, however, didn't flinch. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. Then, unexpectedly, the defense attorney stood up, making a bold move that would change the trajectory of the trial. "We would like to call a surprise witness," the defense attorney announced. A murmur of surprise rippled through the courtroom. Elon's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't been briefed on this move, and it was clear that everyone, including the judge, had not anticipated it. The prosecutor's face twisted in disbelief, but there was nothing they could do to stop it. The door at the back of the courtroom opened, and in walked someone who, under any other circumstances, would have been considered an unlikely ally. It was not an expert, not a lawyer, but rather a familiar face from Elon's past. It was Kimball Musk, Elon's brother. The room fell into an eerie silence as Kimball took the stand. He was no stranger to the media, but this was different. The world had seen him as an investor, an entrepreneur in his own right, but never quite in the same light as his brother. He wasn't the founder of Tesla, nor the public face of SpaceX. But Kimball had always been there, supporting Elon from behind the scenes. Kimball adjusted the microphone, then looked directly at the jury. His voice was steady, yet full of warmth. "I've known Elon my entire life," Kimball began. "We've shared successes and failures. We've argued, laughed, and, yes, even failed together. But one thing I know for sure is that my brother has never acted out of malice. He's made mistakes, yes. But his mistakes have always been in pursuit of something bigger, something better for humanity. And when it comes to his companies, Tesla and SpaceX, he's never put his personal gain above the mission. Never." Elon was stunned. He had never expected his brother to take such a public stand. Kimball's words were simple but powerful. They cut through the media narrative that had been painted for months. The jury, the judge, and the courtroom were listening now, really listening. "My brother's vision is something I've witnessed firsthand," Kimball continued. The dream of making the world a better place through sustainable energy, the dream of sending people to Mars. These are not goals driven by greed, but by an understanding that we, as a species, have the ability to do better, to be better. And I've seen him struggle, seen him face unimaginable odds. But I've never seen him back down. And I've never seen him lie about what he wants to achieve. Kimball paused, looking directly at the judge. I believe that what's happening in this courtroom is about more than just legalities. It's about misunderstanding the man that Elon is. I ask that you look beyond the headlines, beyond the accusations. Look at the man, and look at the impact he's had on the world. And ask yourselves, is he really the villain they've made him out to be? The room was still. The judge sat quietly, listening intently. The prosecutor, though visibly shaken by the unexpected testimony, remained composed. Kimball's words lingered in the air, and for a moment, the entire courtroom felt as though it were holding its breath. Elon sat back in his chair, stunned by the power of his brother's words. Kimball had always been a steady presence in his life, but hearing him speak with such conviction in public, it was different. He had never expected Kimball to step into the limelight like this, but in that moment, Elon realized something important. His brother wasn't just supporting him, he was giving him a second chance. Outside the courtroom, the media began to shift. The story was no longer about a billionaire facing legal trouble. It was about a family, brothers standing together through the storm. Headlines started to change. Kimball Musk defends his brother, Elon, a message of redemption began trending. The public began to wonder if they had been too quick to judge Elon. Could the narrative be turning? Were they witnessing the first signs of redemption? Even in the most uncertain moments, Elon realized that Kimball's testimony wasn't just a lifeline for him. It was a chance for the world to see the Musk brothers as more than just business moguls. It was a chance to show the human side of the man who had changed the course of history. The courtroom drama wasn't over. The judge would make her ruling soon, but Elon had learned something crucial that day. It wasn't just about fighting the legal battle, he needed to fight for the story he wanted the world to remember. This was his chance to rebuild, not just his legacy, but his relationship with the people who mattered most. The trial wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. Kimball's words had reignited something inside him. Maybe the world had been wrong about him. Maybe this was the moment where everything would change. As the day drew to a close and the courtroom adjourned, Elon and Kimball shared a quiet moment together. They didn't need to say much. The unspoken understanding was enough. Whatever the outcome of the trial, Elon knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone in this fight. The days following Kimball's testimony felt like an eternity to Elon. The courtroom drama had shifted in unexpected ways, and the public's perception was no longer as clear-cut as it had once been. The media frenzy, which had initially painted Elon as a corporate villain, now seemed to pivot, unsure of what to make of the Musk brothers' united front. The questions that had once been focused solely on Elon's guilt were now being tempered with curiosity and, in some cases, sympathy. People were asking, could Elon Musk be misunderstood? Elon wasn't naive enough to believe that everything had changed overnight. The legal battle was still far from over. The jury had seen the defense's case, they had heard Kimball's testimony, and now it was up to the judge to make the final decision. And then, the fateful day arrived. It was the morning of the sentencing hearing. The courtroom was once again filled with people. The atmosphere was tense, but this time, there was a slight shift in the air, a quiet sense of anticipation mixed with a lingering uncertainty. Elon sat at the defense table, flanked by his legal team, his face as composed as ever. He had spent the last several days preparing for whatever might come. There were no surprises this time. The judge entered the courtroom, and with a sharp, authoritative gesture, the proceedings began. The prosecutor delivered their final remarks, their voice filled with conviction, but there was something different in the way they spoke. The energy in the room wasn't as hostile, as accusatory. It was almost as if they knew this wasn't going to be as easy as they had thought. Then it was time for Elon's defense attorney to address the court once more. "We have made our case," the attorney said, his voice calm yet filled with an air of hope. "Elon Musk has faced incredible challenges throughout his life. He has made mistakes, as we all do. But those mistakes, Your Honor, were not out of malice. They were part of a journey that has led to the creation of two of the most transformative companies in the world, companies that are changing the way we think about energy, transportation, and space. He has pushed the boundaries of innovation, but it's not just about profit or success. It's about the future of humanity." The defense attorney paused for a moment, letting the words settle. "Your Honor, we ask for leniency, not just because of the impact Elon has had on the world, but because he has already learned from his mistakes. He is committed to making things right. This is a man who is driven by a vision of a better tomorrow, a vision that goes beyond his personal interests. He's not perfect, but he is driven by something greater than himself." As the attorney sat back down, Elon's eyes moved to the judge. Her expression was unreadable as she scanned through her notes. The silence in the courtroom seemed to stretch on for longer than was comfortable, but Elon didn't dare break it. He had learned long ago that in moments like these, silence often carried more weight than words. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice measured and calm. "Your case has been complicated. There are those who believe you are nothing more than a corporate villain, willing to go to any lengths to protect your empire. There are others who see you as a misunderstood visionary, someone who has made missteps, but whose impact on the world cannot be ignored." Elon's heart raced. He had been in many high-pressure situations, but this was different. This moment, this judgment, would define the rest of his life. "I have taken into account the testimony of your brother, the statements from your legal team, and the arguments put forth by the prosecution," the judge continued. "It is clear to me that you have, at times, made decisions that were reckless. But it is also clear that you have taken full responsibility for your actions and have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to your companies and the world you seek to build." The judge paused again, and the silence was deafening. "In light of all this," she said finally, "I have decided that your sentencing will be more lenient than the prosecution had requested. You will face a fine, but there will be no prison time. I believe that you can still contribute to society in meaningful ways, and I am giving you the opportunity to continue your work. However, you will be required to undertake community service, and I will be closely monitoring your actions moving forward." Elon sat still for a moment, processing the words. No prison time. A fine, but not the worst-case scenario. The weight that had been pressing down on his chest began to lift, but there was still a sense of disbelief in the air. He hadn't expected such a lenient outcome. The world had anticipated his downfall, but here he was, standing on the precipice of a second chance. The courtroom erupted in a mix of murmurs and whispers. Elon could hear the faint rustle of papers, the shuffle of feet, but he remained rooted in his seat, his mind spinning. This was a victory. But it was a victory with strings attached, a second chance that came with its own set of challenges. The judge looked at Elon one last time. "Mr. Musk," she said, "I expect you to use this opportunity wisely. Your actions in the coming years will determine whether or not the public can continue to see you as a leader or a liability." Elon nodded, his expression serious. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said softly, though the words felt almost inadequate. As Elon left the courtroom, the weight of the decision began to sink in. The trial was over, but the real work had only just begun. The media, as always, had mixed reactions. Some hailed the ruling as fair and just, while others claimed it was too lenient for someone of Elon's stature. But for Elon, it no longer mattered what the headlines said. What mattered now was how he would move forward. The pressure would never truly go away. The scrutiny would continue, but now, he had a choice. He could retreat into his companies and continue to build the future as he had always dreamed, or he could use this moment to redefine his place in the world. But one thing was clear, Elon Musk wasn't done yet. The court decision had been a turning point. It wasn't just a legal outcome, it was a message. He had been knocked down, but he wasn't finished. And no matter what happened next, he would keep pushing forward. For the first time in weeks, Elon allowed himself a moment of relief. He had a second chance. And this time, he wasn't going to waste it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom drama was over, but for Elon Musk, the real battle had only just begun. As the dust settled from the trial, a new phase of his life unfolded before him, a phase that would require more than just overcoming legal hurdles. It was about redemption, about reshaping the narrative that had been so carefully constructed by his critics. The world was watching, waiting for him to show that he had learned from his mistakes, that he was more than just a billionaire entrepreneur caught in a storm of controversy. In the days following the judge's decision, Elon retreated into the familiar world of his companies. Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures were always the places where he felt most in control. But this time, there was a difference. He couldn't just throw himself into his work and pretend that everything had returned to normal. There was a lingering question, one that he could not avoid: how would the public perceive him moving forward? The media had been quick to report on the lenient sentence, with many speculating that it was a sign of the justice system going easy on the wealthy and powerful. Some believed Elon had gotten away with something. But others, especially his supporters, saw it as an opportunity for a new beginning. For the first time in a long while, the divisive opinions about him were being replaced with curiosity. Could Elon really change? Could he become the visionary leader people had once believed he was? Elon didn't have all the answers, but he was determined to find them. The opportunity to redeem himself had been given to him, and he intended to use it wisely. The first step in Elon's journey to redemption was acknowledging that he couldn't simply go back to business as usual. The mistakes of the past were too big to be swept under the rug, and the lessons they held were too important to ignore. It wasn't enough to continue revolutionizing the world of technology and space without first addressing the impact of his past actions. He knew that he had to show the world that he had changed. He had to prove that his mission to make humanity a multiplanetary species was still rooted in a vision of progress, not self-interest. To do this, he needed to be more transparent, more open about his flaws, and more engaged with the people who had been affected by his actions, whether they were employees, investors, or even critics. To that end, Elon began making public appearances, not just to promote his companies, but to talk about the mistakes he had made and how he intended to learn from them. He appeared at town halls with Tesla employees, answering questions about his leadership and the challenges his companies faced. For the first time in years, he wasn't just the visionary CEO, he was the man who had to confront his own humanity. One afternoon, as he stood before a group of Tesla workers, Elon felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. It was one thing to face a courtroom full of people, but this was different. These were his people, the ones who had built Tesla from the ground up, the ones who had trusted him to lead them into the future. He took a deep breath, his voice steady but earnest. "I want to start by saying that I've made mistakes," Elon said, looking directly at the audience. "There were times when I pushed too hard, when I didn't listen enough, when I acted without considering the consequences. And for that, I'm truly sorry. But I want you to know that I've learned from those mistakes. And I will continue to learn. We're all human, and sometimes, the hardest part of being a leader is admitting when you've gotten things wrong." The room was silent. Elon could see the skepticism in some of their eyes, the doubt that still lingered. But there was something else too, a small shift in their expressions, a glimmer of hope. Perhaps they had seen this side of him before, but not like this. Not with such sincerity. "I ask for your trust," Elon continued. "And I promise you that I'm committed to making this company better, not just for us, but for the world. We're not just building electric cars or rockets, we're building a future that can support life for generations to come." And I believe in that future. I believe in all of you. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't a polished, rehearsed performance. It was raw, it was real, and for the first time in a long while, Elon felt like he was truly connecting with the people around him, not as a CEO, but as a human being. The media buzzed in response to Elon's newfound openness. Some outlets praised him for taking responsibility, for being vulnerable and transparent about his flaws. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether his words were just a PR move or a genuine shift in character. Elon knew that actions spoke louder than words, and he was prepared to show the world that he was serious about his transformation. Over the next few months, he made several more appearances, this time not just in front of his employees, but at community events, tech conferences, and even on podcasts where he discussed everything from leadership to his personal growth. His goal wasn't to convince people to like him again, it was to demonstrate that he was capable of change. As he continued to open up, something unexpected began to happen. The harsh criticisms, the headlines that once felt like daggers, started to fade into the background. The public was no longer as fixated on his past mistakes. Instead, they started to focus on the future, on what Elon Musk could offer to the world next. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about a man who had fallen from grace, but who had the courage to rise again. Despite the positive shift in public opinion, Elon's path to redemption wasn't without its struggles. There were days when he doubted himself, when the weight of his past mistakes seemed too heavy to carry. On those days, he found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned, and on the long road ahead. One night, as he sat alone in his office at SpaceX, staring out at the stars, Elon felt a familiar pull. He had always believed that humanity's future lay among the stars, that reaching Mars was the next logical step for civilization. But now, as he gazed out at the endless expanse of space, he wondered if the journey was more than just a technological challenge. Was it a journey of personal growth, too? He had built companies that were capable of achieving the impossible. But now, Elon realized, the real challenge was rebuilding the trust that had been fractured. The real journey was about earning back the respect of the people who had once believed in him. And so, with renewed determination, Elon Musk made a decision. He would keep pushing forward, not just for the future of humanity, but for his own redemption. He would prove that even a man who had fallen could rise again and do something greater than ever before. As the weeks passed, Elon Musk's efforts to rebuild his public image continued to unfold. The road to redemption was far from straightforward, and every move he made was scrutinized by the media and the public. He couldn't afford to make another misstep, not after everything that had happened. This wasn't just about corporate success anymore, it was about proving to the world that he was more than the sum of his past mistakes. But as much as he worked on mending his public image, Elon was aware that his personal life needed just as much attention. It was no secret that he had a complicated history with relationships, whether it was with his ex-wives, his children, or the people closest to him. Over the years, his single-minded focus on his ventures had caused those relationships to fray, and he knew that if he was to truly change, he needed to repair those bonds too. Elon's first step in this direction came when he decided to reconnect with his family. He reached out to his siblings, Kimball, Tosca, and his mother, May, in an attempt to open up a more honest dialogue. The dynamic had always been complicated, especially with Kimball, who had been deeply involved in the family business from the beginning. There were lingering tensions between them, dating back to the days when they were growing Tesla and SpaceX. But now, more than ever, Elon realized how important those relationships were. It wasn't just about professional collaboration, it was about trust, communication, and being vulnerable with the people who knew him best. It was time to lay down his pride and approach them with humility. One quiet evening, Elon invited Kimball to dinner at his California home. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried a lot of weight. Elon had long avoided personal interactions outside of the business realm, always staying immersed in his work. But now, he understood that his relationships with his family were just as crucial as the success of his companies. Kimball arrived, a little wary but willing. They hadn't shared a meal alone in years, long before the court case, long before the internal struggles that had tested their bond. As they sat down together at the dinner table, Elon was struck by how much had changed in both of them. They were no longer the eager young entrepreneurs dreaming of a better future. They had both been through trials, Elon with his legal troubles, Kimball with his own personal and professional challenges, and those experiences had shaped them in ways they hadn't anticipated. For the first time in a long while, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Elon didn't jump straight into business talk. Instead, he focused on connecting with Kimball on a deeper level. They spoke about their childhood, about their parents, about the things they had missed over the years. They laughed about old family stories, reminiscing about their early days in Canada and the shared dreams they once had. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned more serious. Elon knew it was time to address the elephant in the room. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "The trial, the mistakes I made, the way I've been living my life. I know I've let a lot of people down, including you. And I want you to know that I'm sorry for that. I know I've been distant, especially over the past few years, and I can't undo that. But I want to make things right." Kimball looked at him, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a small nod, he responded. "You don't have to apologize, Elon. We've both made our mistakes. But I think we've both learned from them. I'm proud of what we've built together, but I'm more proud of the person you're becoming now. It's not easy to admit when you're wrong, especially with everything that's happened. But you're showing that you're ready to change. And that's all I can ask for." For a long moment, they sat in silence. The weight of the conversation settled in the room, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt like an unspoken agreement, that they were finally on the same page, that they could begin again. With his family relationships starting to heal, Elon shifted his focus back to his companies. But this time, he took a different approach. No longer was it just about getting the job done, about pushing the limits of what was possible. This time, he wanted to create an environment where people felt heard, respected, and valued, not just as employees but as individuals with their own stories and struggles. He started spending more time with his teams, at Tesla, SpaceX, and even the smaller ventures he was involved in. Instead of making decisions from a distance, he began holding regular meetings where employees from all levels could come and speak with him openly. It wasn't about top-down leadership anymore, it was about collaboration, trust, and mutual respect. Elon knew that he couldn't change the way people saw him overnight. But he was committed to showing them that he was capable of evolving. The days of making rash decisions without considering the consequences were over. He learned that true leadership wasn't just about vision, it was about people. And if he wanted to lead, he had to listen. One afternoon, during a meeting at Tesla, Elon found himself talking to a group of engineers who were struggling with a project. In the past, he might have pushed them harder, demanding results. But now, he simply listened as they shared their frustrations, offering support instead of pressure. "You're not alone in this," Elon said, his tone softer than it had been in years. "We're all in this together. Let's figure it out as a team." It was a small moment, but for the first time in a long time, Elon felt like he was on the right path. His people, the ones who had helped him build the future, were no longer just workers, they were partners in this mission. And they believed in him, not just as a CEO, but as a man who was willing to change. As the months passed, the impact of Elon's efforts began to show. The media had shifted once again, this time, not just to celebrate his business achievements, but to acknowledge the transformation he was undergoing. They had seen the businessman who was driven by ambition and success, but now they were starting to see the man who was willing to confront his flaws and change for the better. Elon's redemption story was no longer just a headline. It was becoming a testament to the power of personal growth and the idea that even the most driven individuals could evolve and learn from their mistakes. As he looked out at the future, Elon knew that the road ahead would be challenging. There would be more setbacks, more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path, a path not just to business success, but to becoming the man he always wanted to be. The journey of redemption was never linear. For Elon Musk, the realization of that truth came slowly, sometimes painfully. His newfound openness, his efforts to rebuild relationships, and his attempts to regain public trust, everything felt like a tightrope walk. One wrong move could send everything crashing down, and despite his success in business and his recovery after the trial, the pressure of it all began to take its toll. While his leadership style had evolved, some of the old habits he had clung to for years remained. His drive for perfection, his tendency to become consumed by his vision, and the immense weight of expectations that hung over him were constant reminders of just how much was at stake. But this time, there was a difference, he recognized it. Though Elon had worked hard to show the world a more human side of himself, he could still feel the intensity of the spotlight that never seemed to leave him. The media, ever vigilant, continued to scrutinize his every word, every action. For the most part, it wasn't malicious, it was curiosity, fascination even. People wanted to know if he was truly changing or if this was another phase, another reinvention to mask his previous mistakes. As the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and various other ventures, Elon was used to dealing with intense pressure. But the emotional burden of rebuilding his public image, repairing fractured relationships, and managing his companies while under constant observation was something he had never quite anticipated. There were moments when the weight of the world seemed unbearable. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his SpaceX office, wondering if this was the right path, if he had what it took to keep pushing forward. Was he truly the man he claimed to be now? Or was he just playing the role of a redeemed entrepreneur, hiding behind a facade? It was a familiar feeling of isolation, one that had followed him throughout his career. He had always been the visionary, the lone figure standing at the forefront of the future, while everyone else either followed or criticized. But now, more than ever, the isolation felt like a double-edged sword. While his vision was clear, the burden of leadership was heavier than ever. It was one afternoon, sitting in his office, when Elon realized that he had been too focused on the external narrative, the media, the public, the court case. He had been so intent on rebuilding his reputation that he had neglected something more fundamental, his role as a leader, not just in his companies but in the broader context of society. Leadership was not just about making big decisions and overseeing progress, it was about taking responsibility for the direction in which the world was heading. Elon had always prided himself on being a pioneer, but the true weight of leadership wasn't about being the first to reach Mars or developing electric cars, it was about guiding people through uncertainty, helping them navigate the unknown with confidence and clarity. He thought about the millions of people who relied on his companies and his leadership. Tesla wasn't just about building electric cars, it was about transforming the world's energy systems. SpaceX wasn't just about getting people to Mars, it was about ensuring the survival of humanity in the face of environmental and existential threats. These weren't just business ventures, they were his contribution to the future of humanity. But now, the responsibility for that future seemed even greater. Elon knew that his decisions could change the course of history, whether it was how energy was used on Earth or how humanity might one day live on another planet. The decisions he made, the way he chose to lead, would echo through generations. This wasn't just about his legacy, it was about the world's future. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and interviews, Elon decided to take a break. He walked out of the SpaceX headquarters and into the night, needing some time away from the chaos of his life. The cool night air filled his lungs as he stood on the edge of the launch pad, gazing up at the stars. For a moment, everything felt still. The noise of the world, the constant pressure, the relentless forward momentum, it all faded into the background. Here, standing beneath the vast expanse of the universe, Elon felt small. But there was comfort in that feeling. It reminded him of why he had embarked on this journey in the first place, not for personal glory, not for wealth or recognition, but for the possibility of something greater. The stars above were a reminder of the infinite potential humanity had. A future in space wasn't just about conquering the unknown, it was about surviving, about transcending the limitations of Earth and finding a new way to exist. Elon had often viewed his companies as tools for that mission. But now, he saw them as part of a much larger story, a story that wasn't about him, but about all of humanity. And that was where the real pressure lay, in the responsibility to guide the future of the human race. It was during this quiet reflection that Elon realized something essential. The redemption he sought was not just about proving himself to the world or repairing his relationships. It was about aligning his personal journey with the broader mission of his companies. He had been so focused on the immediate battles, legal, personal, and professional, that he had lost sight of the bigger picture. He knew he had to get back to the core of his vision. It wasn't enough to fix things on a personal level, he needed to ensure that his companies, his projects, and his ventures were on the right track for the future. With this renewed sense of purpose, Elon began to refocus. He called a series of meetings with his leadership teams, not just to discuss product developments, but to talk about the bigger mission. What did the future of space exploration really mean for humanity? How could Tesla lead the charge in sustainability beyond just electric vehicles? How could his companies become beacons of hope, not just technological wonders? Elon knew that if he was going to truly redeem himself, he had to align his personal growth with his professional endeavors. He couldn't continue to view them as separate. His role as a leader needed to be infused with the same values of integrity, empathy, and accountability that he was working to cultivate in his own life. As Elon moved forward, the pressure didn't lessen. The world would always watch him, always question his motives and his actions. But now, he was no longer afraid of that scrutiny. He knew that true leadership wasn't about escaping the pressure, it was about handling it with grace, about embracing the weight of responsibility and using it to fuel his drive to create something meaningful. The future was uncertain, and there would be more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, Elon felt ready. The redemption he sought wasn't just about fixing his past mistakes, it was about becoming the man capable of shaping the future. He understood that leadership was about more than just vision, it was about taking responsibility for the consequences of those visions and guiding the world toward a better tomorrow. Despite his recent efforts to heal old wounds, the pressure on Elon Musk continued to mount. The relentless cycle of public scrutiny, high-stakes decisions, and the weight of his personal journey had taken a toll on him. However, Elon wasn't one to give up. He'd faced adversity before, whether it was the early days of Tesla or the struggles of SpaceX, and each time, he found a way to rise above. Now, as his companies continued to evolve, Elon found himself confronted with a new challenge. It wasn't just the continued public perception of him, but the rapidly changing technological landscape. The world was moving forward at a pace that even Elon found difficult to keep up with, and it forced him to question everything he had built so far. It started with a conversation at Tesla's headquarters. The team was gathered around the table, discussing the next phase of electric vehicles. Elon had always been at the forefront of the green energy revolution, pushing for widespread adoption of sustainable technologies. But now, with new competitors entering the market and massive technological advancements in battery storage and artificial intelligence, he couldn't help but wonder if Tesla had reached the limits of its innovation. Where do we go from here? Elon asked, looking around the table. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but rather at the room as a whole. It was a moment of vulnerability, a rare pause in his usually relentless pursuit of progress. He wasn't just asking about the next car model, he was asking about the future of the planet, the future of human civilization, and his place in it all. "We keep pushing the envelope, Elon," said one of the lead engineers, his voice steady but full of ambition. "There's still so much to be done. Autonomous driving, full battery replacement, grid-level energy storage. We're not done yet." But Elon wasn't satisfied with that answer. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Pushing the envelope was always part of the plan, but now it felt like there was something more at stake, something bigger than just Tesla's success or the latest market share statistics. His company had grown so large, so influential, that he wondered whether they were just playing catch-up to the changing global challenges. Maybe, Elon said, after a long pause, it's time we take a step back and rethink everything. What if the true future isn't just electric vehicles? What if it's about changing the entire way we think about energy, transportation, and even life itself? The room fell silent. Elon's words were heavy with meaning, each one carefully considered. The team members exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. But deep down, they all knew this was the kind of thinking that had propelled Tesla, and Elon, into the spotlight in the first place. In the weeks that followed, Elon poured himself into this new way of thinking. He began to study emerging technologies more closely than ever before. From hydrogen fuel cells to advanced AI and quantum computing, Elon delved into everything that could shape the next phase of human progress. His days became longer, his mind more consumed, as he sought to uncover a grander vision for the future. Yet, as he grew more excited about the potential, he also became more isolated. The same determination that had once propelled him through difficult times now felt like a barrier between him and the people closest to him. It wasn't just the physical distance created by the demands of his work, it was the emotional distance too. Elon realized that in his pursuit of greatness, he had allowed himself to become disconnected from those around him. He hadn't spoken to his children in weeks. His relationship with Grimes had become strained, and the once strong bond he had with his team now felt fragile, as if everyone was running on separate paths. The old Elon, the one who buried himself in his work to avoid confronting his emotions, had returned in full force. But this time, he saw it for what it was. He understood that if he wanted to truly change, not just the world, but himself, he had to find balance. Balance between his professional ambitions and his personal life, between the endless pursuit of technological advancement and the human connections that grounded him. Elon knew the first step had to come with a conversation. It was time to confront the disconnect he had created in his life. He made the decision to reach out to Grimes, who had been notably absent from public events and media appearances in recent months. Their relationship had always been complex, but Elon understood that it was time to face whatever had caused the distance between them. Grimes agreed to meet him in a quiet, secluded spot, away from the media frenzy and the constant bombardment of the public eye. As they sat across from each other, Elon felt the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything," Elon began. "About us. About where we're headed. I've put so much energy into pushing the boundaries of the future, but I think I've lost track of the people who matter most in my life. I want to fix that. I need to fix that." Grimes, who had always been supportive but fiercely independent, listened without interruption. After a long pause, she responded softly, but with conviction. "You've always been about the future, Elon. But the future isn't just about what you build, it's about the people you build it with. You can't do this alone. You never have." Elon nodded, taking in her words. It was a humbling reminder. His entire life had been focused on shaping the future, but in doing so, he had neglected the very relationships that made the future worth fighting for. It was a turning point. After the conversation with Grimes, Elon found himself reevaluating his priorities. He still believed in his mission, his vision for a sustainable, spacefaring future, but he realized that the path to achieving it wasn't one that could be walked alone. He needed to repair his relationships, rebuild his emotional resilience, and surround himself with people who supported him, not just in his ambitions but in his humanity. At work, he began to take a more collaborative approach. Instead of isolating himself in his thoughts, he started to open up more with his leadership teams. He shared his doubts, his fears, and his hopes for the future, allowing others to weigh in on the decisions he was making. It wasn't easy for someone as independent and intense as Elon, but he knew it was necessary. He even made a conscious effort to spend more time with his children. They were growing up quickly, and he couldn't afford to miss out on these formative years. He would visit them more often, take them on outings, and just be present in their lives, even if it meant stepping away from the work that consumed him. As Elon took these steps toward healing, he also began to see the impact of his work in the world. Tesla was leading the charge in renewable energy, SpaceX was making strides toward Mars, and other ventures, like Neuralink and the Boring Company, were gaining traction. Despite the challenges and setbacks, he was beginning to realize that true leadership wasn't about pushing yourself to the limit or bearing the burden alone, it was about understanding the importance of balance, collaboration, and connection. The road to redemption was far from over. There would be more obstacles, more tests of his resolve. But now, Elon Musk had a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a leader, not just of companies, but of people. And that understanding would carry him through the difficult moments ahead, as he continued to build a future that was as much about humanity as it was about technology. The moment of clarity that Elon Musk had experienced on that quiet evening with Grimes was a watershed moment in his personal life, but the path ahead was still uncertain. Despite his realizations about the importance of relationships and balance, the business world didn't slow down, and the challenges that came with it only seemed to intensify. It was almost as though the universe had presented him with a paradox, a deep need for connection and reflection, yet the external world demanded more of him than ever. Elon was not one to shy away from hard decisions. In fact, some might argue he thrived on them. But now, those decisions weren't just about technology or profit. They had grown more complicated, because the choice ahead wasn't just about what he could build, it was about how he could truly lead. The future of Tesla and SpaceX were inextricably tied to his vision, but Elon was increasingly aware that without recalibrating his leadership and considering the human side of his endeavors, he could end up losing everything that truly mattered. It all started with a call. Elon had just returned to his office after an afternoon of meetings when his assistant let him know that there was a visitor waiting. To his surprise, it was an old friend, one who had played a pivotal role in his life years ago, when he first made the bold decision to found SpaceX. The man's name was Jeffrey Lang, a former colleague and now a key player in the clean energy sector. He was known for his innovative approaches to energy storage, something that Tesla had been working to perfect for years. Jeffrey, Elon greeted him, shaking his friend's hand. "What brings you here?" "I think it's time we talked, Elon," Jeffrey said with a serious expression. "We need to face something. The world is changing faster than you realize, and it's not just about electric cars or sending rockets to Mars anymore. We're on the brink of a new energy revolution, and you're in a unique position to lead it. But I have a proposition that might challenge everything you think you know about your company's future." Elon raised an eyebrow. Jeffrey Lang was never one for idle talk. Whatever this was, it was serious. As Jeffrey spoke, Elon felt the weight of his words. Jeffrey had spent the last few years working on a groundbreaking energy storage system that could dramatically change how solar energy was stored and distributed. His invention wasn't just about improving batteries, it was about completely rethinking how energy could be captured, stored, and utilized in a way that was both scalable and sustainable. "This isn't just an incremental step forward, Elon," Jeffrey continued. "This is the kind of breakthrough that could change everything. If we get this right, Tesla could lead the entire world into a new energy paradigm. But it won't be just about electric cars. This will be about every aspect of energy consumption, from how we power our homes to how industries function. The potential is beyond anything we've seen before." Elon listened intently, the gears in his mind turning. It was a vision he had never fully considered, a shift from being a leader in the electric car industry to becoming a cornerstone in the global energy infrastructure. It felt exciting and daunting all at once. The kind of revolution that Jeffrey was proposing was the kind that could propel Tesla, and perhaps even the world, into a new era of energy. But with this new vision came a massive responsibility. It wasn't just about building a better battery, it was about reshaping the world's energy systems, from the ground up. It would mean new partnerships, new risks, and even more public scrutiny. For the next few days, Elon found himself grappling with the weight of Jeffrey's proposition. It consumed his thoughts at night and clouded his focus during meetings. He couldn't shake the question, was this the right direction? Was he ready to take on something so monumental, especially when his life had already been filled with so much change and uncertainty? He returned to the quiet spaces that had become his refuge, his early morning walks, his late-night reflections. The decision was immense, but one thing was clear: if Elon Musk was ever going to truly change the world, this was the moment that could define his legacy. And yet, there were doubts. He wasn't naive enough to believe that everything would fall into place without cost. This wasn't just about innovation, it was about reshaping industries, about challenging powerful institutions that had been entrenched for decades. Would he be seen as a visionary, or would this push create even more enemies? Would the risks pay off, or would he be setting himself up for the greatest failure of his career? The weight of leadership pressed heavily on him once again. The same questions that had plagued him for years, about balance, about personal sacrifice, about what it meant to truly lead, now seemed more urgent than ever. To help sort through his feelings, Elon decided to have a candid conversation with his inner circle at Tesla. He gathered them in the war room, the same space where major decisions had been made for years, where Tesla had plotted its rise to prominence. This time, though, the stakes felt higher. "Jeffrey Lang came to see me," Elon began, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his thoughts. "He's proposed something big. Something that could change Tesla's future, and the world's future, in ways we never imagined. But before I make any decision, I need to hear what you all think." There was silence in the room, as each of the key leaders present processed the gravity of what Elon was suggesting. Finally, one of Tesla's top engineers, Emma, spoke up. "Elon, you've always said that we're not just building electric cars, we're building the future. This idea Jeffrey's proposing isn't just another product. It's a step toward a whole new way of thinking about energy. It's a risk, but it's also an opportunity we can't afford to pass up." Another team member, Lucas, chimed in, "But the challenges are enormous. It's not just a matter of creating a new product, it's about changing the entire infrastructure. The world isn't ready for it yet, and that's going to take more than just technology. It's going to take political will, massive partnerships, and public support." Elon nodded, absorbing their feedback. He had expected this, he knew it was going to be a difficult decision. But in that moment, he felt more certain than ever that this was the path forward. It wasn't going to be easy, but the world wasn't looking for easy solutions, it was looking for real, transformational change. Elon made his decision. He would take on the challenge. He would lead Tesla into a new era of energy, where the company could not only continue to innovate in electric vehicles but also completely revolutionize the way the world thought about energy production, storage, and consumption. The future, he realized, was never going to be about just surviving the pressure. It was about embracing the challenge, pushing beyond the limits of what was known, and finding the courage to make decisions that could reshape the world. Elon Musk was ready for the next phase of his journey. It was a journey that would require more than just business acumen, it would require a new kind of leadership, one grounded in humanity, resilience, and the unwavering belief that anything was possible if the vision was bold enough. And so, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, Elon Musk took the first step into the unknown. Elon Musk had made his decision, and with it, a heavy sense of resolve settled over him. The future was now clearly defined, but it was still clouded by uncertainty. The energy revolution he was about to champion was not just a technical challenge, it was a global one. Elon knew that the road ahead would be full of obstacles, financial, political, and technological. And yet, his confidence, though tempered by reality, was unwavering. If anyone could spearhead such a monumental change, it was him. But even the most visionary leaders cannot anticipate every storm. And just as the plan for a new era of energy began to take shape, so too did the storms that would test Elon's resolve in ways he never expected. The first signs of resistance came swiftly. The financial markets were fickle, especially when it came to a company like Tesla, which had already endured countless ups and downs. When Elon made his announcement about the new direction Tesla would be taking, a bold foray into global energy systems, investors reacted with skepticism. Tesla's stock price plunged by 15% in a single week. "This is a massive risk, Elon," said one of Tesla's top financial officers, Peter, as they sat in a conference room, the weight of the situation palpable. "We've been fighting for years just to be taken seriously as an electric car company. Now, you're asking us to take on energy storage systems, grid infrastructure, and political lobbying? This could set us back a decade, and the market isn't convinced." Elon didn't flinch. He understood the concerns, but he also knew the world needed a paradigm shift, and that shift was worth the risk. "We're not just building a car anymore, Peter," Elon replied, his voice steady but firm. "We're building the future of how the world consumes energy. We're going to give them a sustainable, decentralized solution to power everything from homes to industries. It's not about the short-term market reaction, it's about the long-term vision." While Elon stood firm, the internal resistance was just beginning to take form. The company had always been built on a spirit of innovation, but now, with the shift in focus, many of Tesla's longtime engineers and leaders felt a sense of uncertainty. They had poured years of effort into perfecting the electric vehicle, and now they were being asked to take on an entirely different kind of project. Energy infrastructure was more complex, more deeply political, and more capital-intensive. "There's a reason why no one has succeeded in this before," one senior engineer, Mark, said in a private meeting with Elon. "The energy industry is locked down. The politics are brutal. The utility companies won't just let us waltz in and change the system overnight." Elon had expected these challenges, but they still stung. He knew they weren't wrong. The energy industry was indeed entrenched, and the status quo was fiercely protected by large, powerful players. But Elon also knew that if anyone could change it, it was Tesla. "We won't be waltzing in, Mark," Elon responded, his eyes steely with conviction. "We're going to innovate. We're going to partner with other clean energy leaders. We're going to change how the world thinks about power. And it starts right here, right now." As Tesla's new initiative gained momentum internally, the external challenges began to intensify. The energy industry wasn't just filled with entrenched corporate interests, it was also a highly regulated, deeply political field. Governments around the world had a heavy hand in shaping the energy landscape, and getting the necessary regulatory approvals for a global overhaul wasn't going to be easy. Elon found himself in increasingly uncomfortable meetings with policymakers, both in the US and abroad. He was accustomed to fighting battles in boardrooms and with investors, but navigating the world of government policy was a whole new arena. He faced questions about Tesla's ability to handle the complexity of energy grids, the political feasibility of renewable energy at such a scale, and whether he could garner support from international leaders. One such meeting, with the U.S. Department of Energy, almost went sideways. As Elon sat across from a group of seasoned policymakers, he could feel the tension in the air. These were men and women who had seen ambitious proposals come and go, and they weren't easily swayed. "Elon," one of the senior figures at the table began, "you're asking for substantial government investment and regulatory changes to make this energy initiative a reality. How do you plan on convincing the public that this is not just another of your moonshots?" Elon took a deep breath. He had anticipated this kind of skepticism. But he knew the key was framing this as an opportunity, not just for Tesla, but for the country, for the world. "This isn't about a moonshot, it's about a necessity," Elon replied. "The world is facing a crisis with energy production, with fossil fuel dependence, and with climate change. What we are proposing isn't just good for business, it's good for national security, environmental sustainability, and economic growth. This is the future. And the sooner we act, the better." The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. The meeting ended with no clear resolution, but Elon could sense that he had made a small dent. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a start. By now, some of Elon's own team had grown increasingly uneasy with his vision. The higher the stakes became, the more dissent began to surface within the company. It wasn't a vocal rebellion, rather, it was a slow, creeping unease that manifested in the form of disengagement, subtle resistance, and even silent exits. One night, as Elon sat in his office overlooking the bustling Tesla headquarters, he received an unexpected email. It was from one of the company's top engineers, Sarah. She had been with Tesla since the early days, and her departure felt like a seismic shift. The email was short and direct. Elon, I've given this a lot of thought, and I just don't believe in the direction the company is taking. The focus has shifted so far from electric vehicles and transportation, and I'm not sure we can pull this off. I'm stepping down. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's no longer with Tesla. Elon felt a pang of regret, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. Every company faced this kind of disruption, especially when a founder like Elon was at the helm, pushing boundaries. He knew that not everyone would share his vision, he had seen it before. But it didn't make it any easier. As the weeks passed, the resistance continued to mount. Financial, internal, and political challenges all combined into a storm that threatened to overwhelm Tesla's new initiative. But through it all, Elon refused to back down. This was his moment. The world needed energy transformation, and he was determined to make it happen, even if it meant facing storm after storm. The pressures were immense, but Elon Musk had always thrived under pressure. As the weight of leadership pressed upon him, he realized that true leadership wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about having the clarity of vision to steer through chaos, and the determination to push through, no matter the cost. And so, despite the mounting obstacles, Elon doubled down. He continued to push forward, refining his strategies, learning from every misstep, and focusing relentlessly on the larger picture. As Elon Musk moved forward with Tesla's new energy revolution, the challenges continued to pile up. While many had doubted his vision from the start, there was no denying that his drive and determination had brought Tesla to this pivotal point. But the road to success was rarely straight, especially when you were trying to change the fundamental infrastructure of the world. Every step forward seemed to come with a new hurdle, a new opponent, or an unexpected setback. But it was in these moments of adversity that Elon Musk's leadership was truly tested. What had once been a singular focus on electric vehicles had now expanded into an all-encompassing vision for the future of energy. And with that came the weight of responsibility. It was time to make a choice. How would he handle the mounting pressure, both from within his company and the world outside? Though the business side of things was difficult enough, Elon Musk's personal life was being pulled in a direction that mirrored the chaos unfolding at Tesla. The weight of leadership was beginning to take its toll, not just on his company, but on his relationships and his well-being. His family, his friends, and even his romantic relationships had been affected by his relentless drive. Grimes had been supportive in the beginning, but as the pressure intensified, their bond began to fray. Late-night calls about business decisions, endless hours of work, and the constant stress of managing two massive companies had worn down even the strongest relationships. She tried to be understanding, but there was a limit to how much one person could handle, even if they shared the same vision. One evening, as Elon returned home after a grueling day of meetings and calls, Grimes confronted him in the living room. She was upset, a look of exhaustion and frustration in her eyes. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I get it. You're changing the world. But what about us? What about our family? You're never here anymore, and when you are, you're distant. I need you, and so does our child." Elon stood frozen for a moment. He had been so absorbed in his mission that he hadn't realized how much he had neglected the people closest to him. The guilt hit him hard, but he knew that apologizing wasn't enough. Actions, not words, would determine the future of his relationships. "I'm sorry," Grimes, Elon said, his voice softer than usual. I've been consumed by this, and I haven't given you or our family the time you deserve. I'll do better. I promise. Grimes nodded, but the sadness in her eyes told a story of deep frustration. It's not just about promises, Elon. It's about balance. If we don't figure this out, I'm not sure we'll have much left to save. Amidst this personal turmoil, Elon found himself reaching out for advice, something he hadn't done much in the past. When the stakes were high, when the world seemed to be spinning out of control, it was often helpful to hear from others who had been through similar struggles. One of those people was Larry Page, the co-founder of Google. The two had crossed paths over the years, but recently, they had spent more time discussing ideas about the future of technology and how to handle the pressure of leading revolutionary companies. Elon arranged a meeting at one of Larry's private offices, far from the noise of his everyday life. Larry welcomed him with a warm handshake and a sense of calm that Elon envied. "Elon, it's good to see you," Larry said, offering him a seat. "I've been following what you've been doing with Tesla and SpaceX. You've got a big vision, and I know it's a tough road ahead." Elon sat down, leaning back in the chair. "You don't know the half of it," he said with a sigh. "It's been one challenge after another. I've got the pressure of changing the world, managing a billion-dollar company, and trying to hold my life together. It feels like I'm losing everything that matters, Larry." Larry took a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I get it, Elon. I've been there. But you need to remember that no one can change the world alone. It's not about sacrificing everything you love for the sake of your work. You need to find the right people, the right partners, the right balance. It's easy to forget that when you're in the middle of it all, but you can't carry the weight by yourself." Elon nodded, the weight of Larry's words sinking in. It was a reminder that he wasn't alone in this journey, and that true leadership came not from solitary effort, but from collaboration and the ability to find a balance between ambition and personal well-being. As the days passed, Elon's determination to push forward with Tesla's energy revolution grew stronger. However, the challenges from the outside world seemed to only intensify. Tesla faced mounting political opposition. Utility companies, powerful players in the energy industry, lobbied heavily against any attempt to disrupt the status quo. The regulatory hurdles were massive, and every step forward seemed to be met with an equal and opposite pushback. One afternoon, as Elon walked through the Tesla Gigafactory, his thoughts were interrupted by a call from the White House. The president's team had requested a meeting to discuss Tesla's energy initiative. Elon wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that this meeting could be a pivotal moment in determining whether or not his vision would succeed. The meeting was held in the Oval Office, with several key figures from the energy sector in attendance. The tension in the room was palpable, as they discussed Tesla's plans for revolutionizing the energy grid. Elon had expected resistance, but the hostility in the room was more intense than he had anticipated. "We're not just going to hand over control of the energy market," Musk, one of the senior political advisors, said, his voice cold and condescending. "You're talking about disrupting decades of established infrastructure. This isn't something we can just sign off on. The political consequences are enormous." Elon felt the weight of their words, but he didn't back down. "What we're talking about isn't disruption for the sake of disruption. It's about building a sustainable, decentralized energy future. It's about reducing dependency on fossil fuels and creating a better, more efficient system for everyone. The question is, are we going to look at this as a challenge or as an opportunity?" There was silence in the room. The words hung in the air, and Elon could feel the intensity of the moment. The choice was clear: give in to the pressure, or push forward, no matter the consequences. As the meeting ended, Elon felt a strange sense of calm. The world had thrown everything it could at him, and yet he remained undeterred. There were still many challenges ahead, but Elon knew that the road he was on was the right one. There would be more storms to weather, more people to convince, and more sacrifices to make. But the conviction he had in his mission was stronger than any obstacle that stood in his way. Elon Musk had reached a crossroads in his journey. The world was watching, and the choices he made in the coming days would shape not just Tesla's future, but the future of the entire planet. It wasn't just about innovation, it was about leadership, about finding the courage to make tough decisions, and about proving that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, one person could change the world. The weeks following the critical meeting at the White House were a whirlwind. The pressure Elon Musk had been under was like a constant weight on his shoulders, but he had grown accustomed to it. After all, his entire career had been defined by taking on seemingly impossible challenges. Still, something about this moment felt different. For the first time in a long time, Elon questioned whether the fight was worth it. His personal life was in disarray, his company was under constant fire, and the political resistance seemed unyielding. Yet, he knew that stepping back was not an option. He had a vision that could change the world forever. But just as Elon steeled himself for the long battle ahead, something unexpected happened. The very thing he had feared the most arrived. A lawsuit. A class action lawsuit filed by a group of Tesla shareholders, accusing him of mismanagement and fraud related to his push for the energy revolution. The lawsuit claimed that Musk had misled investors, inflating the potential of Tesla's new direction while disregarding the financial stability of the company. The media caught wind of it immediately, and the storm that followed threatened to drown out everything else. The lawsuit's arrival sent shockwaves through Tesla. Elon had always been aware that his bold moves came with risks, but he had never imagined they would lead to such an explosive legal battle. The accusations ranged from exaggerating Tesla's ability to execute on its new energy vision to manipulating stock prices with his public statements. The media buzzed with headlines like "Musk accused of deceptive practices" and "Tesla investors sue Musk over energy ambitions." For someone as accustomed to being in the spotlight as Elon, this was a new level of scrutiny. The lawsuit was about more than just business, it was about his character, his integrity, and his ability to lead. One evening, as Elon sat in a meeting with his legal team, the weight of the situation seemed to sink in. His lead attorney, Robert, was presenting the case's details, his face grim. "Elon, this is serious," Robert said. "They've gathered a significant amount of evidence, including emails, texts, and public statements you've made about Tesla's future. They're arguing that you misled investors into thinking the energy initiative was more than it was. If this goes to trial, it could take years to resolve, and the damage to Tesla's reputation could be irreparable." Elon leaned forward, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't mislead anyone. I've always been clear about our goals. Yes, the energy vision is bold, but it's not a fantasy. I'm not in this for the quick wins. I'm in it to build a sustainable future." "I know that, Elon," Robert replied. "But the problem is that the market doesn't always share your vision. And the legal team on the other side is going to paint this as reckless behavior that put everyone at risk." Elon's mind raced. He knew this wasn't just about the lawsuit, it was about everything he had worked for. His energy revolution, his dreams for a cleaner, more sustainable world, were now under threat from a group of people who didn't understand his true intentions. It was a fight he wasn't prepared to lose. The days that followed were filled with intense legal discussions, public relations battles, and countless meetings with Tesla's executives. The team worked tirelessly to put out fires on multiple fronts, ensuring investors that Tesla's core business was still sound while simultaneously defending Elon's character and the company's larger vision. Elon's public stance remained unyielding. "Tesla's mission has always been to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy," he said in a statement. "We've never deviated from that path, and we won't be distracted by those who only see the world in short-term terms. I have always been transparent with our investors, and I'm confident that we'll emerge from this stronger." But despite his words, the tension was palpable. As the court proceedings began to drag on, Elon's personal life continued to fray. Grimes was growing increasingly frustrated with his focus on the lawsuit, and their relationship, already fragile, seemed to be nearing its breaking point. Elon spent most of his nights at the Tesla headquarters, his mind constantly consumed by the case. He had always known that running a company like Tesla would be difficult, but the emotional and mental toll was beginning to take a noticeable toll on him. For the first time, he questioned whether he had taken on too much. Then, just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, Elon received an unexpected message. It was from Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, whom Elon had confided in several months earlier. "Elon, I know things are tough right now, but don't let the noise get to you. This is the moment that separates the dreamers from the doers. The world needs you, and you can't let this lawsuit derail everything. You've been down before, and you've always come back stronger. Just remember why you're doing this." The message was brief but powerful. It reminded Elon of the bigger picture. He wasn't fighting for a company. He wasn't fighting for fame or fortune. He was fighting for something much greater, the future of humanity. It wasn't about winning in the short term, it was about ensuring that future generations would have access to clean, sustainable energy. With renewed clarity, Elon decided that he wasn't going to let this lawsuit define him. He had a responsibility not just to Tesla, but to the world. And he wasn't going to back down now. He called an emergency meeting with Tesla's board of directors. It was time to take drastic action. The lawsuit was a serious issue, but it was also a distraction. The longer they let it hang over them, the more it would drain resources and focus. It was time to shift the focus back to the mission. "I'm not going to let this slow us down," Elon told the board. "We have to move forward. I'm going to fight the lawsuit with everything I have, but the energy revolution doesn't stop for anyone, not even a lawsuit. We need to keep pushing. We need to scale up, build the future we've been talking about." As the months wore on, Elon's resolve only grew stronger. The legal battles continued, but he remained focused on Tesla's long-term goals. In the background, his legal team worked tirelessly, and despite the pressure, the lawsuit began to lose steam. The evidence was weaker than anticipated, and the case against Elon lacked the convincing power it initially appeared to have. Tesla's energy initiative also continued to gain traction. New partnerships were formed with clean energy companies, and the first successful trials of Tesla's energy storage systems in remote regions of the world proved that the technology was viable. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning. The media began to shift their narrative, no longer focusing solely on the lawsuit. Instead, they started covering Tesla's breakthroughs in energy storage and renewable power. Elon's steadfastness in the face of adversity became a symbol of resilience. By the end of the year, the lawsuit was settled. It had taken a toll on him, but Elon had come through it stronger and more determined than ever. Elon stood on the rooftop of Tesla's new energy headquarters, looking out over the vast expanse of the city below. The wind blew gently through his hair, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. The lawsuit was behind him, and the future was still there for the taking. It hadn't been easy. It had been a battle that had tested his personal and professional limits. But in the end, the fight was worth it. He had emerged stronger, and the energy revolution was now on its way to becoming a reality. Looking out over the horizon, Elon Musk knew that this was just the beginning. The victories of the past year had been monumental. Tesla's energy initiative was gaining international attention, the lawsuit was behind him, and the company had seen record profits. But success had not come without its costs. Elon Musk had sacrificed much, his time, his relationships, and even parts of his mental well-being. Now, as the dust began to settle from the legal battle, new questions began to emerge. Could he continue this pace? Was he truly prepared for what was coming next? Elon sat in his office at the Tesla headquarters, staring out at the skyline. His thoughts were clouded, and he could feel the weight of the decision that was looming over him. His work, the mission that had consumed him for years, was no longer just about Tesla. It had become about changing the entire global energy infrastructure. The pressure was immense. But Elon wasn't one to back down. If anything, the challenges ahead would only push him further toward his ultimate goal. The rest of the world was watching now. Tesla's success had shifted from something that was just a company to a symbol of the future, a future where sustainable energy was not just a dream, but a reality. And that meant the scrutiny was intense. Media outlets, investors, and even politicians were looking to Elon for answers. The US government had started discussing how to adopt and scale up Tesla's energy solutions nationwide. The EU was on the brink of adopting new green energy policies, and Tesla's innovations were at the center of those discussions. But with that attention came new problems. Elon had to balance competing demands, government regulations, shareholder interests, and, most importantly, the well-being of the people who worked tirelessly alongside him. With Tesla growing exponentially, maintaining the company's innovative culture and guiding its expansion was becoming increasingly difficult. Despite all the successes, Elon could feel the tension in the air. The weight of responsibility, once exhilarating, now felt suffocating. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, Elon found himself standing in front of a mirror, staring at his reflection. He could barely recognize himself anymore. His face had grown gaunt, the circles under his eyes were darker, and his thoughts constantly raced. He had always been driven, but now it felt different. It wasn't the drive to succeed, it was the pressure to never fail. The cost of his obsession with his work had become too apparent. His relationship with Grimes had deteriorated to the point where they had barely spoken in weeks. And his connection to his children, despite his love for them, had suffered from his constant absence. Even his closest friends, like Larry Page, had noticed the shift in him. He was becoming consumed by something larger than life, and in doing so, he was losing sight of everything that had once grounded him. It wasn't just the personal toll, it was also the feeling that he was carrying the world on his shoulders. Everyone believed in him, investors, employees, the public, but what if he failed? What if his vision for the future of energy was just a dream that couldn't be realized? The doubt crept in like a shadow, uninvited but impossible to ignore. That night, after hours of restless thoughts, Elon decided to do something he had never done before. He reached out for help. He dialed the number of his old friend, Jim, a former mentor from his earlier days in Silicon Valley. Jim had always been a steadying force in Elon's life, someone who offered perspective when the world felt too overwhelming. "Jim, I need to talk," Elon said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. The pressure is unbearable." Jim was quiet for a moment, sensing the weight in Elon's voice. "Elon, I know you've been carrying a lot, but you've always known how to navigate these kinds of challenges. The difference now is that you're not just carrying your company, you're carrying the future of humanity. And that's a hell of a lot to carry by yourself." Elon ran a hand through his hair, trying to collect his thoughts. "It's not just about the company anymore. It's about being the face of an entire movement. Every decision I make is scrutinized. Every step I take is analyzed. What if I can't do it? What if I can't pull this off?" Jim chuckled softly on the other end of the line. "Look, you're not the first person to feel this way. Hell, I've felt it too. The weight of it all. But that's the price of greatness, Elon. You're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And yeah, sometimes it feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But remember, you don't have to do it alone. You've got a team. You've got people who believe in you." Elon's mind raced, and he felt a sudden clarity. Jim was right. For so long, he had been trying to do everything himself. The vision, the work, the execution, it had all rested on his shoulders. But that was never how any great achievement was made. Greatness came through collaboration, through sharing the load, through trusting others to take on pieces of the vision. The next day, Elon gathered Tesla's senior leadership team for an emergency meeting. The conference room was filled with the usual faces, his chief engineers, product developers, and executive officers. But today, there was a noticeable shift in Elon's demeanor. "I've been thinking," he began, standing at the head of the table. "We've built something incredible at Tesla. But we can't keep moving forward with the same structure we've always had. The energy revolution is bigger than all of us, it's not something any one person can carry alone." The team exchanged glances, sensing the seriousness in Elon's tone. "I've decided that we need to restructure how we operate. We need to empower our people more, trust them to take the reins and lead parts of this mission on their own. I'm not talking about just delegating tasks. I'm talking about giving them the authority and freedom to innovate, to make decisions without constantly having to go through me." It was a bold move. Elon had always been known for his hands-on approach, his tendency to micromanage and ensure that everything met his standards. But now, he realized that in order to sustain the vision for Tesla and beyond, he needed to let go, to trust in the incredible team that had helped him get this far. "I can't do it alone anymore," Elon continued. "But together, we can make this happen." The changes Elon implemented had a profound effect. He began stepping back from the day-to-day operations and allowed his leadership team to take on more responsibility. In turn, Tesla's innovation began to thrive even more. Engineers and executives, empowered with more autonomy, came up with creative solutions faster than before. The company's energy storage systems became more efficient, its electric vehicles more affordable, and its solar technology began to make serious strides toward mass adoption. Elon was still heavily involved, but his role had shifted. He became more of a visionary and a guide, leading Tesla from the front, but with a greater focus on long-term strategy rather than daily operations. With this new approach came a renewed sense of purpose for Elon. He was no longer consumed by the weight of trying to do everything himself. Instead, he was focused on the bigger picture, the future of energy, the fight against climate change, and the better world he was working to build. And with the support of his team, it felt like anything was possible. Elon stood once again on the rooftop of Tesla's new headquarters, looking out over the city that had become his home and the company that had become his life. But today, the view was different. There was a sense of hope in the air, a feeling that they were on the verge of something truly world-changing. The energy revolution was far from over, but Elon knew that with his team by his side, they could achieve the impossible. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light over the world, he felt a new sense of peace. The battle was not over, but he was ready for whatever came next. The year was drawing to a close, and with it, a new chapter in Elon Musk's life. Tesla's growth had surpassed even his boldest expectations, and the energy revolution was no longer a distant dream, it was becoming an undeniable reality. But as he stood at the helm of this transformation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had reached a crossroads. The constant pressure had tested him, the trials had challenged him, and yet, here he was, standing stronger than ever. But the world was constantly evolving, and so too was Elon. It was clear to him now that the fight he was in wasn't just about winning, it was about staying true to his original mission, to something far bigger than any individual, any company, or any technology. Elon had spent so much of his life focused on the future, on what was to come, that he had often forgotten to stop and appreciate how far he had come. Tesla's stock had soared, and new partnerships had been forged with global powerhouses, all leading to one singular, massive shift: the world was ready to embrace sustainable energy. Yet, with this immense success came a new level of responsibility. The pressure to continually innovate, to maintain Tesla's leadership in the energy space, and to guide humanity toward a sustainable future was never far from Elon's thoughts. He knew the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but he was no stranger to navigating uncharted waters. In his quiet moments, he reflected on the journey, the early days at PayPal, the birth of SpaceX, and the birth of Tesla itself. The impossible tasks he had once undertaken now seemed like stepping stones leading to the next great challenge. And while some might look at him and see an invincible titan of industry, Elon saw only a man who had been driven by the desire to solve problems that had no easy answers. One evening, as he walked through the halls of Tesla's main campus in Palo Alto, Elon stopped in front of a large map on the wall. It detailed the vast network of solar grids and electric vehicles Tesla had established across the globe. Yet, he knew that this was only the beginning. He had always said that his mission was never just to build a company, but to change the world. Now, the time had come to take that idea further. The technology Tesla had developed, energy storage, electric vehicles, solar power, was revolutionary, but the world still relied heavily on fossil fuels. The transformation had to be bigger, more inclusive, and more immediate. "I've been thinking," Elon said, turning to his closest colleagues who had gathered around him. "What if we took everything we've learned and expanded it beyond just cars or homes? What if we could develop a global, interconnected energy system, one that transcends borders, that brings power to every corner of the world?" He paused, letting the weight of the idea sink in. A world powered by clean energy, with no limitations. A global grid that connects every country, every continent. A unified energy network that allows us to share resources, harness the sun, the wind, and all the natural energy sources our planet has to offer. His colleagues stared at him, stunned by the scope of the idea. It wasn't just another product or system. This was a vision of a global energy ecosystem, a vision that would require unprecedented collaboration, bold leadership, and years of investment. But Elon had never been one to back down from such a challenge. "I don't know how long it will take," Elon continued, "but I do know this: if we want to survive as a species, we need to rethink how we live, how we use energy, and how we relate to the planet. It's not just about technology anymore. It's about the future of humanity." The announcement of Tesla's new goal sent ripples throughout the world. The idea of creating a global, interconnected energy grid seemed impossible to many, but for Elon, it was the next logical step. The world was no longer looking at individual solutions, they were looking for a unified approach to solve the most pressing problem of all, climate change. Elon and his team began working on a roadmap to make the global grid a reality. Governments, international organizations, and private companies around the world began to take notice. Tesla's leadership in energy storage and solar power put them in an ideal position to lead the charge. But the journey would be difficult. Regulatory hurdles, geopolitical tensions, and differing national interests would present immense challenges. Despite the obstacles, Elon's confidence never wavered. He knew that what Tesla had achieved was far more than just a business. It was a movement, a vision of a future where the world's energy needs could be met without compromising the planet's future. The months that followed were filled with negotiations, technological advancements, and international partnerships. Tesla was not only innovating, it was reshaping the very infrastructure of the world's energy systems. Elon and his team traveled to every corner of the globe, from the vast deserts of Africa to the towering skyscrapers of Asia, meeting with world leaders, environmental activists, and business magnates. However, as the project gained momentum, a new challenge arose, one that Elon had not anticipated. A coalition of oil and gas companies, fearing the potential threat of this new global energy vision, began to push back. They lobbied governments, ran media campaigns, and used their vast resources to undermine Tesla's efforts. For the first time in years, Elon faced a formidable foe, one that could not be defeated with innovation alone. It would require strategy, diplomacy, and a deep understanding of global economics. Elon found himself once again at a crossroads. The battle for the future of energy had escalated, and now, more than ever, it was clear that it wasn't just about technology. It was about changing the way the world thought about energy, about business, and about survival. Elon sat in a quiet room, his mind running over every detail of the situation. He knew he couldn't face this challenge alone. The global energy revolution required more than just Tesla, it required a collective effort, a united front. And in that moment, Elon understood something fundamental. The energy revolution was no longer just his fight. It was everyone's fight. It was a battle for the future of humanity. With that realization, he called together his team, his allies, and even some former rivals who had once doubted him. It was time to unite, to forge a new kind of alliance, one that could transcend political and economic borders. Together, they would push forward, not just for the sake of business or profit, but for the future of the planet. I've always believed that the impossible is just something that hasn't been done yet, Elon said to the group. Now, we have to prove that the future can be ours, together. We can no longer wait for someone else to act. It's on us. As the sun set on another day, Elon looked out over the horizon, feeling a sense of peace and resolution. The future was still uncertain, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But he knew one thing for sure: he was no longer carrying the weight of the world on his own. He had a team, a movement, and a vision that was greater than any individual could bear alone. And as the stars began to twinkle above, Elon Musk knew that the true revolution was just beginning. The future was bright, and together, they would see it through. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?